Hi everyone, I just thought I'd make a little video here on my approach to figure drawing using this drawing that I did. It's a quick sketch. I don't remember if it was 2 minutes or 5 minutes, but something very fast that I did with pencil on paper, scanned it into the computer to show you guys what I think about when I'm starting a figure drawing. Whether I'm doing a quick sketch like this or something longer that gets more rendered out or is more completed, I start it the same way and I have the same considerations. So I wanted to use this as an example of what I think about starting any figure drawing. And more than that, I want to focus today on the orientation and tilt of the three major forms of the body. So the three major bony masses of the body are the head, the rib cage, and the pelvis. Okay, these are considered solid masses that don't bend or twist in and of themselves because they're made of bone. The head, of course, is the skull and the face, the cranium, all that. The rib cage, even though technically it's somewhat flexible, it expands when you breathe and possibly twists even just slightly when you twist your vertebra. It's still generally considered as an unmovable bony mass by the artist. And then the pelvic area, the pelvis, is the two iliums or ilias, or however you would pluralize that in Latin. The wings out here, the crests that create the pelvis. All of that stuff is made out of solid bone and does not move. So it's helpful that we can at least use those three masses, orient them in space, and then all of the action, the transition happens in those areas between these masses, like the neck here or the abdomen in between the ribs and the pelvis. That's where a lot of the action and reaction takes place as these three major masses move. So capturing the pose in large part is about understanding how these three bony forms relate to one another, how they've moved through space. You know, you have your anatomy man, like this guy over here, who just stands up perfectly straight, and then once he's alive, he moves, he does something, he's in action. So when we look at the head on the model in our minds, we don't have to actually draw this out, what I'm doing right now. But in your mind, you should at least have this idea already. The idea of this kind of a box. Okay, so let me turn off this layer. That box has to be in your head before you attempt to do any kind of drawing of the head. You don't literally have to draw this box, but if you're not used to figuring out orientation, you should draw this box. I would say that it's good practice to do figure drawings where all you do is draw these boxes and forget about rendering out any kind of human pose or anatomy. So, okay, so that would be the box that we're dealing with for the head. When we look at the model, hopefully we can gauge, oh, he's looking down and to our right, so we can intellectualize that into the following box. Now, if you're having trouble figuring out these things, let's talk, how do you figure out the orientation of a box in general? Well, here's a box that we're looking at head on, no pun intended. This is just a head-on box. It doesn't have any tilt or anything. Now, the first tilt that we might want to consider is whether it's tilted this way or this way, okay? Our head happens to be slightly tilted this way. So we can figure out at least these two lines. Now, to figure out these other two lines, meaning this one and this one, the best anatomical thing to look at on the model, in my opinion, would be the corners of the brow. These guys right here. And I always think of that as the spot that you would bump your head on a cabinet by accident. Okay, you can feel it on your own skull. Where is it that you would bump something? Right on the corner. So if you find those two corners, look at that. It gives you the correct angle of the box. Okay, so in this case, we're dealing with something like this for our front plane. It's tilted in that perspective. But that's only giving us the tilt of the front plane. We still have two other dimensions to consider, which are, for example, are we looking at the top of this box? Are we looking down at it like that? Or are we looking up at the box like this? Of course, in our situation, we're looking down at the box. We're seeing the top plane. But before going further into that, we have to think about the third dimension. Are we seeing the left plane of the head like this? Or are we seeing the right plane of the head like this, perhaps? And of course, we are seeing the left side. It's his right, the model's right, but it's our left. So with that, we have to gauge, well, how much degree, how much are we looking down at this head? How far is he looking down? And same thing for the side plane. How much side plane are we really seeing? Because you could have this same exact orientation for the front plane, and you could barely be looking down at it, but you could be seeing a lot of the side. So you have to, there's subtle differences, even though both of these two boxes, boxes 1 and 2, even though both of these are facing down and to the right to some degree, it's a whole different degree. So you have to figure that out as you're doing your drawing. Okay, so that at least gives us the sense of our front plane, sorry, not just the front plane, the whole box of the head. But these corners of the brow, they're really helpful. They help you figure out the angle for the base of the nose, for the corners of the mouth, for all kinds of details, for the centers of the eyes. Gives you all that. So it's a great anatomical mark to look for when figuring out that orientation. So moving down, when you get to the rib cage, the best thing to look for when finding the front plane is the corners of the 10th rib down here at the bottom of the rib cage. That is a great guide in helping you find this angle, which, depending on the pose, may end up being the same or a different angle than the front plane of the head. Here you can tell they're kind of similar. Okay, so this box is obviously tilted at this angle, you can see by my center line. And it actually goes up here behind the head. The head is overlapping, sitting because of the perspective we have. And I'm just kind of artificially making a box out of this because the rib cage is not a box. The head is not a box. We're just using the idea of the box to help us. Now you can tell I'm not really looking at the right or left very much of this rib cage, but I am kind of looking up at it, which I implied a little bit with this round line going over the form here. So what I'll do is give an underplane this way, a slight underplane, without really giving any sense of a side plane. Okay. And let me do some artificial shading on the side of this box too, just to really emphasize our boxes. So there's two boxes. You can see the head is looking down to the right, much like number 1 over here. And our rib cage is really looking kind of at us, just a little bit above. It's hard to even make an arrow pointing in that direction. It's so subtle. We're just kind of getting this for the rib cage. Maybe I'll call this guy head over here and this guy rib cage over here. Okay, so moving down the body, we get to the pelvis. And again, we have luckily two corners to look for when we're figuring out the tilt of a pelvis, and those are what's called the ASIS, anterior superior iliac spine. It's not something, it's necessarily important to memorize that name, except to know that the pelvis, how it has two wings that come to the center here, like this. Maybe exaggerating the width of a pelvis here, but we have two corners in front that, yeah, that is a pretty exaggerated drawing and it looks like cartoonized. But anyway, we have two corners there at the front of the pelvis which give us those corners that we're looking for on our box. So this box, you can tell by my center line, happens to be tilted down this way. And we're looking ever so slightly down on this box. If we had x-ray vision, we'd actually be looking down into the pelvis this way. And I'll give, again, some artificial shading to the side plane just to really make it clear. So, oh, and I drew that right on the drawing. That's unfortunate. Let me undo that and redo that briefly. Just take half a second. Hitting undo as many times as I can. And that's as far as it'll let me go there. Okay, so anyhow, what we can do here is on our new layer is do that box over again. We're looking down at this pelvic box like so. And giving that side plane shading again. Okay, here's our center line coming down here. So again, looking at our three boxes, you can see this one is faced in a much different direction. It's coming out this way, like this. This one is pointed almost directly at us, just we're getting a little bit of the underside. And this one is pretty aggressively facing down this way. Three very different tilts. To do our third guy over here, we have something like this. This here is our pelvis. So we have head, rib cage, pelvis, all faced in three different directions. Now those are the stiff, unmovable, bony masses of the body. So when you compare that to our drawing, what is so useful about that? Well, look, here we have the rib cage tilted over to the side compared to the pelvis, so that between this anatomical landmark, here, let me get a new color just so you see what I'm talking about. Between this landmark here and this landmark here, we have a fairly short distance. But on the other side, between those same 2 points, we have a long distance. So the body has to react. The body actually has to do something now. It squishes on one side and it stretches on the other. So what we get is skin that pinches on this side and a muscle which really bulges out and presses down here against the bone of the pelvis. Whereas on the other side, it's quite the opposite. We have this long, fluid S-curve stretch here as that muscle is being pulled and stretched out. So on this side, we're feeling the rib cage coming in this way, the pelvis pressing up this way, and in between we get all of this compression. Whereas on this side, we feel the opposite. That's being pulled up that way, that's being pulled down that way. The line in here that we're getting is being stretched out in both directions, the opposite of compression. Here we have this accordion folding in. Here we have the side of the accordion being pulled out and breathing. Okay? So that quality, feeling that, gives you a lot of the dynamic quality of the pose. And other things start happening thanks to that. Like in here, you might notice some of the belly muscles and fat here are starting to compress against the pelvis here. And the navel is tilted here and pulling that way as the body's twisting. The muscles of the abdomen pulling from this landmark here, they're stretching down. Do that line one more time. Stretching down in this direction. So look, on the left, everything feels bunched. On the right, everything feels stretched. This is stretching here. Over here, we're getting some compression. And that gives you a lot of the action of the pose. We can't really do much about the neck in those along those same lines here, just because of the angle of the pose. There's not much to show except the way the neck over here is pressing into the trapezius, which is bulging out because of the lift of this arm. And the same thing is happening on this side with the trapezius. It's bulging as this shoulder is pushing up against it. But you can see how useful it is to understand what the three major bony masses are doing, not just so you get the contrast and the twist and really feel what the body is doing compared to our stiff anatomical man who just stands up straight. This gives us a sense of what the body's doing, but it also gives us the opportunity to show in the transitional sections like the abdomen and the neck and other places throughout the body, of course, the way that things react, meaning the squish on one side versus the stretch on the other side, etc. I mean, those things will happen all through the body. Like if this arm is being lifted up, we feel the same thing here, that the shoulder is compressing here. We're getting compression against the bulging bicep that's pressing, as this is being pulled up. It's having to compress around that arm. And, a million other places we'll see that. As the leg is being pulled up, we'll find compression in here versus this side where the leg is really just going back in space, etc. So anyway, these are the three major masses. Try to learn to see them as blocks, and that way you will make decisions about all three dimensions. Try not to see them as round forms. I guess I could have covered that before. Why not just do these as eggs? For the head, for example, we could just see this thing as an egg. The problem with the egg is that it's ambiguous. We can't tell which way this egg is facing until we put a bunch of lines through it. We'd have to do a center line this way. We'd have to come with a line down this way just to be able to tell that it's facing this direction. With a block, you're forced to look for corners, and you're forced to make very concrete decisions about the way things are facing. If you were to do this entire pose with just round masses, it would be so ambiguous what this form is doing. Is it twisting? Is it is it turning, or is it just a snowman stacked up? The blocks really give you a sense of what is happening in the pose. Anyhow, that's a good starting point. It takes a while to get good at this. When you look at a live model, it's not so easy because, like I said, the head is not really a box, neither is the rib cage, and neither is the pelvis. The artist uses the idea of a box to help analyze the pose and solve all the complex problems of a figure pose. So it's difficult when you look at a model. They don't look like this. They don't look like a series of boxes. You have to get used to asking yourself questions about the orientation of these forms and making decisions and drawing boxes. You'll be wrong a lot at first. You just won't be right. You'll get it wrong. You'll think you're looking up at a box when you're looking down at it, or vice versa, etc. Or the degree to which you're looking up or down at a box. You might be wrong. But with practice, you start getting right, and then your drawings start making a lot more sense. So even if you're doing like a 25-minute pose, it's okay to spend that 25 minutes just figuring out boxes and not doing anything that looks really human or active. Just trying to figure this out. It all goes in the bank, and later on, when this is second nature to you, you can sit and do a 2 to 5 minute figure drawing without literally doing any boxes, just doing the drawing. And at that point, you're really more qualified to create action and twist and gesture and all those things. So I hope you enjoyed that demonstration, and I'll look forward to doing another one in the future for you guys. Thanks a lot. Bye.